It is so great to see you because I loved your book. I loved the book. I didn't know what to expect. And I found myself sort of connecting all through it, not just with you as a person, but with birds.
Good.
I mean, it was a shocker. And then I start, because, birds are here, we see them, we know they're there, but because of the book, I'm now aware of them.
Excellent.
You know?
That mission accomplished.
So I know you have some friends in the audience who can give voice to some of the birds we may be talking about, so be prepared, y'all, because I've included you in this. So when he says yellow pecker wookie pookie, somebody has to stand up and do the yellow beller pookie wookie. But you have both a New York Times best-selling book, Better Living Through Birding, and a hit TV series on Nat Geo, Wild Extraordinary Birder. What has this been like for you? Because this is like, whoosh. How you doing with it?
I'm okay, and I think the reason why I'm okay is because for many, many years, I worked with kids in the New York City public schools.
Right.
I don't talk about it a lot in the book because I don't like to, bring kids into, keep them out of the public eye. But like for years and years and years, I've been doing this and getting them outside of the concrete and into the local green spaces and teaching them about birds. And when you've got to do it for a bunch of fifth graders, doing it for a camera is easy. So I think that actually helped kind of prepare me. And because I've been doing that for so long, and the way I like to put it is there are certain things I've been working on, fighting for a long time. Justice for black people, equality for queer people, and wild birds for all people.
Yeah.
And because I've been doing this for a while, this is just a new way to do that. This just opened up new possibilities, helped me reach new audiences. So it's working out okay, I hope.
Well, it looks like it's doing well. I'm really knocked out by it. But what does it mean to you to be able to share this passion for birds? Because you are unique to most people's thinking. When people think about birding, see, I remembered what you said. They're not thinking about black people. They're just, it's like travel. People believe black people don't travel. They say, I'm going to Croatia. You say, well, any black people going to Croatia? And no one ever raises their hand because you're not looking around enough. There are lots of people traveling who are of color. So what is it like to be the front runner in birding?
I'm not. I am carrying forward a legacy from others before me.
Yes.
My dad,
yes.
who was a biology teacher, my birding mentor when I was a kid, Elliot Kuttner,
yes.
a Jewish World War II veteran who gave me so much in my birding. So I'm sort of carrying that forward. But also, as you said, I used to joke when I was a kid, and it was almost kind of true that you could count the black birders in North America on the fingers of one hand.
Yeah.
But that has been changing happily.
Yeah.
And so, I may be at the moment the most visible.
Yeah.
But there's J. Drew Lanham, a professor down at Clemson University, who won a MacArthur Genius Grant largely on the basis of his work articulating the soul of black birders that he's been doing for years. There's Scott Edwards, who is the head of the ornithology department at my alma mater, Harvard, who rode a bicycle across the continent with the Black Lives Matter thing stuck on the back and birded the whole way there and the whole way back. So, there's Karina Newsom, who is a young black woman, African-American biologist who's been studying down at the coast of Georgia and what's happening to the birds there with climate change. So, there are tons of us now, more of us. There are not enough. There should be more.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I hope with the show. And like I said, carrying it forward, I'm hoping that, because, it's almost a cliche.
Yeah.
But people say you can imagine yourself doing something if you can look out there and see other people like you doing it.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that with, a black man, a black person being the face of like this major birding show, that a lot of kids, black and brown kids, might look at it and say, oh, maybe I can do that too. So if that happens, then as I said with the book, when you said, oh, it made me aware of birds, if that happens, mission accomplished.
I think it's probably happening. I think it's happening. And one of the stories that I loved in the book was you talking about your dad taking you that very first time and meeting the man who became your mentor. Can you talk about that just a little bit? Because I love that.
Sure. My dad knew he had this bird-crazy son on his hands. He's probably like, I don't know where this came from, but okay, I got it. So what am I going to do with it? So, and he was a school teacher. So he, during the work week, he's working exhausting hours because teaching school is hard.
Yeah.
So his weekend comes, he thinks he can sleep in on a Sunday. He's got to get up to take his son out to the South Shore Audubon bird walk, so I can go see birds. And he did it without complaint. He got himself up, took me out there. And so here we are on our first walk ever with South Shore Audubon. And this guy is teaching us how to use binoculars, and he's got all this energy, and he leads us down a path of Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, and he sets up a scope, and the bird's kind of far away. He takes a quick look, and he's like, we've got a pair of American woodcocks here. And I'm like, oh, American woodcocks, I've never seen those. I go running up to the scope, and I look at it, and I kind of walk away, and I turn to my dad, and I go, I don't think those are woodcocks. And my dad is like, tell him. And I'm like, I'm not telling him. So he's like, push me. I go over there. I'm like, excuse me, sir. I don't think those are woodcocks. Why don't you think those are woodcocks? Because Elliot had this very outgoing personality. I said, because the pattern on the head is stripes, not like a woodcock would have. And this time he looks for real in the scope, and he's like, you're right. Everybody, this young man has just correctly identified these birds. They are snipes, not American woodcocks. And he just took one look at me after that, and he's like, this one's mine. And he made it a point, to foster that passion for birds after that. So that's how it got started.
I love that story. Because I can see it happening. I can see it happening, and him going, all right now. All right. So I just asked you that question. And that part too. Oh, well, I'm going to hold off on that because I don't really want to go there. I don't know. So you also love to travel.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So what was it like to be on the road filming the series? And were you just losing your mind the whole time? And how did you decide what you were going to do? I mean, what was it? Did you have a good time?
I did have a good time. It was very interesting because when we first started shooting, I'm new to television.
Right.
So the production team felt like they had to explain, look, there's a lot of downtime when we're setting up shots, and, you're going to have to just a lot of time sitting around before you're actually called on to do anything. So, please bear with us, get used to that. I'm like, I'm fine. Because I'm in this wonderful place where there's all these birds. I can go birding while they're doing what they need to do. In fact, half the time they had to be like, we're ready for you. And I'm like, one more second. I'm out on the trail or something here. And they're like, no, now. So it was like that. So it was fun. Sometimes a lot of travel, a lot back to back can be tedious, but not really. I kind of enjoyed it. I picked up the travel bug from my grandmother. She was a world traveler. I was kind of like Bilbo Baggins at first. I was like, I don't want to go anywhere. And then I traveled the first time, and I'm like, and I want to go here, and I want to go here, and I want to go here. So it just sparked, apparently, the latent travel gene I inherited from my grandmother.
Well, the world opens up. The world opens up. But one of the things that we were talking about in the back is why we would rather people not call it bird watching. Can you explain why?
Sure. Well, birding is fewer syllables.
Yes.
But more importantly, when you're birding, you're not just watching. You're also using your ears, for example. And I consider myself an ear birder, as we say. I rely on my ears very heavily to help me find the birds and tell what they are. And then, for example, in Extraordinary Birder, when we go to Puerto Rico, we meet a birder who is blind. Yeah. And he birds solely with his hearing. And in fact, they have repurposed him, used him
right.
when they take recordings of that particular area of Puerto Rico, of the forest, because they can't have anybody 24/7 monitoring the forest, but they can set up these sound recorders, and then he goes through those recordings listening to tell them what's in the forest over the last 24 hours, because he can sort the sounds.
Wow.
So that's why we use birding now instead of bird watching, because you are really using both senses. And that's one of the big points, I think, about birding, is that anybody can do it. You don't have to be sighted. You don't have to have hearing. You don't have to have mobility. You can bird, if you're homebound, you can bird from your window. Right. You don't have to live in a countryside. You can bird here in the middle of Manhattan. Right. I know, because my partner and I are up on the roof looking for the kestrels every day and watching the kestrels attack the red-tailed hawks every day, because that's their favorite sport.
Right.
And that's a show right in the middle of concrete-laden Manhattan.
So I'm going to ask the audience, except for Kristen's friends, to close their eyes, because I want Kristen's friends to give us the sound of the kestrel.
Ooh. Oh, they can do this.
Okay, so everybody close your eyes, and somebody from Kristen's group give us the sound of the kestrel.
Yeah.
It's like a kiki.
Well, I would add an extra syllable. It's kind of like a click, 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 like that.
Y'all have to pick up your skills. Pick up those skills.
And the funny thing is that, my partner John, he's a birder, but, a relatively new birder. He hears that now and he's like, kestrel. He's looking around.
It's great. I mean, because you start to notice the bird sounds. And if you're walking down the street, you think, oh, I heard that one the other day. Who is that? Where did that come from? And you say to yourself, wait a minute, what are you doing? What are you doing, Whoopi? Come on.
No, but it's wonderful. It opens up a whole new window on the world to you, a whole new way of experiencing it. And it ties into the travel, because now, I don't go anywhere without packing my binoculars, because God forbid I should be in a new place and there are all these new birds and I, don't have the means to really observe them the way I would like to.
Right.
So, I'm going to Paris and I'm supposed to be going to, the Louvre and the Musée d'Orsay and I'll do all that, but you will also find me at the crack of dawn in whatever local green park there is, so I can see some European robins and see some European blackbirds.
So here's a dopey question. Do European robins and European blackbirds tweet differently?
Completely differently, especially because European blackbirds are actually completely unrelated to our blackbirds. They are, however, closely related to our robin. And it's funny, because if you ever see one, if you're ever in Paris and you see this black bird and you look at it and you're like, wow, that looks like the way it's acting and the way it moves, it's like someone spray painted a robin black. And they're actually that closely related. They're in the same genus, as we say. So they're very closely related. So their blackbird is really sort of closer to our robin.
Wow.
And our blackbirds are totally separate.
Right. Our blackbirds are like blackbirds.
Right.
Yeah. I don't even know where that came from. I don't even know what happened. Can you tell us about one of the favorite life birds that you saw while filming? And can you tell us the difference between a spark bird and a life bird? what is your spark? This is 14 questions. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what is a spark bird?
Okay, so a spark bird in birding lingo is the bird that got you started, the bird that made you say, wait, what is this? What is this bird? And why am I noticing birds now? And why can't I stop?
Right.
That's what a spark bird is.
Okay.
So for me, the spark bird was a red-winged blackbird.
Okay.
Which is a real blackbird.
Yeah.
But anyway, by our standards.
Yeah.
So I saw it when I was a kid, about 9 or 10 years old. I put a bird feeder up in the backyard and kept wondering what all these crows with red in the wings were.
Right.
And then I thought for a couple of seconds that I had discovered a whole new species of crow, and then found out, no, oops, it's a red-winged blackbird. So that was my spark bird, but that got the ball
right.
So a life bird
right.
is when you get a bird that you've never seen before. So that you'll be getting life birds your whole life.
Yeah.
Because there will always be some bird you haven't seen. And some of them take on or like become holy grail birds because you really want to see it in one day, and then one day there it is, and it kind of blows your mind. And that's one of the best feelings in birding. For example, one of the best, you asked about life birds I saw filming the show. The Puerto Rican toady I had never seen before. It is tiny and adorable. It's kind of green above, whitish below, some red on it, and this oversized head with the oversized orange beak that pokes out. And it's just the cutest thing alive. Right. And the great thing is, this bird wanted to try and lead us away from its nest, so it was putting itself in our face so that we would follow it instead of going towards its nest. Right. So we got really good looks at it. And it's
And what was it called?
Puerto Rican toady. And the interesting thing is, when I go into the schools with kids, one of the other volunteers had just come back from Puerto Rico, and so she was showing her slides, and some of the birds she saw in Puerto Rico, and the kids were dutifully watching. And then she put up the slide of the Puerto Rican toady, and every student in the class went, oh, because they all wanted to see it. So when I saw it, I practically went, oh, because it's that cute. It's really adorable.
Do your friends know about the Puerto Rican toady?
I imagine most of them do, yeah. They know about toadies, probably. We don't have toadies in North America, but they are in the Americas, because there are different families of birds depending on whether you're in the tropics or in the temperate zones. And some of them are in both, but toadies are pretty much tropical.
Well, so let's close our eyes again, and perhaps someone can give us the sound of the toady.
I don't think you're going to get the sound of the toady.
No toady?
You're not going to get the sound.
Guys, really? What's happening with y'all? All right, I'm going to just do one more with y'all, and then I'm not coming back. Is there a difference for you in terms of birding in an urban environment like New York versus a more rural, expansive environment?
Well, I mean, of course, when you're in an urban environment, you're more aware of man's mediation of the habitat. Right. Changing of the habitat, radically changing where you are. But I always keep in the back of my head that, okay, we have radically changed this area, but it's not like we're suddenly not part of nature anymore. Right. Beavers radically change the area where they are. Right. Ants and termites in the tropics can radically change the habitat where they are. So, we are just a species that does it maybe to more of an extreme, but we are still part of the natural order, much as we might like to convince ourselves otherwise. And I think it's important for us to keep that in mind, because I think it would change how we view our role in the ecology. And if you think a city like New York, a megalopolis like New York, is not part of nature anymore. Right. Remember that we sit smack in the middle of the Atlantic Flyway, a major migration route. So all these birds funneling up the coast in the spring hit New York City, and, we are right in their path. So that's why, there's a lot of important things we can do, like make sure that there are resting spots for them. That's why Central Park is what's called a migrant trap. That's why it's so important that New York City Audubon has passed bird safe glass initiatives here in New York City, which is awesome. What it means is that any new buildings constructed have to use glass that to us looks just like glass, but the birds can see it. So they don't smash into it as readily. That's huge. Exactly, yes. And now New York City Audubon, shameless plug because I'm on the board of New York City Audubon, but now New York City Audubon is working on a lights out initiative so that we reduce the light pollution at night, because again, a lot of these songbirds migrate at night and they can get disoriented by the lights. So, there's a lot we can do to ameliorate the impact of our effects on the natural environment. But yes, you're still in nature if you're in the city. It's a little easier to understand that when you're in the middle of a marsh or you're in the middle of a vast field or a forest. But, you're kind of always there, and the birds are always with you.
Well, that's the amazing thing about New York. I mean, I grew up here, and there were always birds that you think, because, pigeons. Most people think people think they know pigeons, but they're really kind of gorgeous when you look at them. You don't need to spend a whole lot of time with a pigeon, but they have these really great heads, and they have this great under here, and they're just really beautiful.
Well, and here's the other
iridescence, yes.
And here's the other thing about pigeons is that they're like us. They come in all kinds of colors, and they still do, because the pigeons we see, they're all what they call feral. They were originally captive birds. They got loose, and because they were captive, people bred them the way you breed dogs for certain characteristics. So they bred pigeons for certain colors. I want a white one. I want a black one. So they did that, and then they got loose. And they all started breeding together. And you would think they would sort of, over the centuries, average back to that original, gray-bodied, bluish, iridescent, feathered on the head and neck pigeon. Nope. They're still coming in all kinds of crazy colors and patterns.
The Canadian pigeons are black.
Some of them, I'm sure. You know what I was amazed by when I went to Toronto, and all the squirrels were black and all the homeless people were white, and I'm like, the world is topsy-turvy. I was like,
well done. So it's true. It's true. Outside of Central Park, what's your second favorite place to bird in New York?
My rooftop. I love to sit in my roof garden and try to get, because all the birders here in the audience know we all have our lists, and we have lists for our favorite patch, and I have my roof list, and I'm always eager to add another bird to my roof list that I have not seen before. So, and just, I don't know, it's just seeing something from your own home. There's something really, really special about that. So, like a couple of times I've had ravens, which are still relatively uncommon in New York City, but the numbers have gone up. And one time I was in my apartment and I heard quack, quack, and I'm like, raven! And I went running. I knocked over a glass. It shattered all over the floor. I dashed up the stairs, but I saw the bird soaring around and got all excited, and yay, raven. So.
I like that. What? So it's instinct that brings the birds every year across our paths, because it felt like this year there were more. It just felt like there were more. Or maybe it's because, the hawks weren't, I was concerned for the hawks because I wasn't sure how they were doing this year.
Hawks in this town are doing just fine.
Yeah?
In fact, right now in Tompkins Square Park, which is near where I live, there's a pair of red-tailed hawks that have nested there for a couple of years now, and their nestlings have fledged. So they're essentially full-grown hawks now. The tail hasn't turned red yet. But they're gawky teenagers, and they've grown up around people, so they have very little fear of people. So they're in the open, flopping around, learning to fly, learning to hunt, and you can witness that spectacle. It's the best show in town, and I always tell people, Tompkins Square Park is the place to be this time of year, because you can watch this in your face. A red-tailed hawk could easily land as far away from me as you are right now, and he'll just sit there. and, look at you and be like, yeah, so. That's what they're used to people.
How's the couple up here on Central Park West or down there?
Well, the most famous red tail on Central Park died. That was Pale Male.
Yeah.
So he's gone, but his progeny. I don't know this for a fact, but since he was one of the first of the really urban red tails in this town, and I can only imagine that a lot of his kids who grew up used to people, ended up forming a lot of the population of the red tails that live in the city now. So he may be gone, but his legacy certainly lives on. So we should all be so lucky, right?
Yeah. Do they mate for life?
No. Well, there was a lot of drama with the Tompkins Square Park red tail, I think a year or two ago, because he had kind of 2 wives at the same time. And
so very New York of it.
He was splitting his time between 2 different nests, and then one female came in and chased his old female. It was it was like Peyton Place of birds. So, do they mate for life? They sort of, kind of. Yeah. That's true for a lot of species, though. A lot of the species we think mate for life, they're doing a little on the side. Happens a lot because they've done genetic testing on some of these birds that mate for life, and they're like, So.
Were you surprised while you were writing your book? Was it easier than you thought or harder than you thought?
It was harder than I thought. Because I am not a particularly confessional person.
Right.
And if you have read the book or know me at all, I like to maintain a Vulcan demeanor that does not let any emotion out. So, and Cheyenne here, my editor, one of my editors is here, and she knows how it was like pulling teeth to try to get me to put the emotional stuff on the page sometimes. So that was hard. But also what was hard is that I'm used to writing fiction.
Yes.
And when I'm writing fiction, I am the master of the universe. I control everything. Yes. I create the world. I populate all the characters. I decide who they are. Life isn't like that. So to tell...
It isn't?
Yeah, shockingly. Shockingly.
Oh, my God.
So, trying to tell a life, and tease out the themes and make it coherent while still remaining, true to what actually happened, that was a lot harder.
Yeah.
So, between the emotional, taking your clothes off in public and the trying to shape a story that is unruly, I found it very hard. Yeah.
Well, I have to ask you about something. I guess it's part of your story, and I have to bring it up. When we spoke after the incident with the woman in the park, you were like very zen about it. In hindsight, what do you think happened? What do you think happened?
2 people collided in the park over a mundane issue, but one of them decided to take it someplace else and inject race into the situation in a way that, and she is not what is important in that issue. Focusing on her is a distraction. What's important is the racial bias that was revealed in that moment. That's why it matters. And that racial bias, in that situation, is minor manifestation, but for a lot of people was a revelation. A lot of white people, because we know as black people, we live it. But for a lot of white people, I think they were like, Obama's been president, racism is done. Well, actually, no. And this is how deeply it runs in our society, that it bubbles up in a city like New York that's supposedly liberal, in someone who considers themselves a progressive. And if it can happen here, well then, guess what happened a few hours later in Minneapolis, where that racial bias made a white cop think it was appropriate for him to kneel on a black man's neck until he was dead. Where that racial bias made the other cops standing around there think it was okay for them to stand there and do nothing. And it pops up in all sorts of ways. You look at the fact that Washington, D.C., which is urban and largely black and brown, and they have no representation in Congress, whereas rural, overwhelmingly white Wyoming, with fewer people than D.C., gets 2 senators. And rural, overwhelmingly white Vermont, which has fewer people than D.C., gets 2 senators, and D.C. gets none. That's where the racial bias matters. That's what we have to keep focused on, because those are the things we can fix, those are the things we need to fix, and those are the things we can change. Focusing on her, if I had decided to sue her, say, and for whatever, and I could be high-fiving that, ooh, we threw her in jail. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court is rolling back affirmative action.
Yeah.
So keep your eye on the prize and make the changes that matter.
Okay. So it's out of the way. Okay, we talked about it's out of the way.
So no, I do want to ask one question, though, of the audience. Raise your hand if you think we can get that constitutional amendment to make D.C. a state. Okay, that's a trick question, because it doesn't take a constitutional amendment. All it takes is for Congress to pass a law. Yes, constitutionally, there has to be a federal district. But all Congress has to do is change a law to change the boundaries of that district. That's just a law. That's all it takes for D.C. to become a state.
It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
It's going to be a while.
It's going to be a while. But
it's going to happen.
We have to be talking about it, because the people of D.C. can't do it, because they don't have any representation. It's up to us in places like New York and every place else around the country. We have the power to say to our representatives, make this happen, because it's wrong. It is the great civil right, one of the great civil rights problems that we still have in this country, that those largely black and brown people in D.C. who pay taxes just like the rest of us don't get any representation. We fought a revolution over that. No taxation without representation. And that's what we've got in D.C. So let's end that plantation mentality in D.C. and give those people what they deserve, statehood. So off my soapbox now.
You know what's going to happen now, right? People are going to say, well, I was listening to him, and maybe we should put him up to become senator.
No.
I'm just saying people are going to start talking about you this way because of the way. And it comes from being an activist. It comes from being a man who has seen how easy it is for things to slip backwards. The voice is brilliant. When you think that the nation's capital, the people who live in the nation's capital have no voice. Mm-hmm. It's very peculiar.
Mm-hmm. It's the only major democracy where that's the case. It's insane. And yet it is allowed to continue because who is affected? That's where the racial bias bubbles up. And, we've got to fight it. It's up to us to do something about it.
Well, I have to tell you that one of the things that came out of that encounter was New Yorkers recognizing that people of color bird. Because I guarantee you, people said, he was what? Come on.
Can I tell you a story? When I was working at Marvel, they decided they were doing Barbie comics, and they decided that they wanted to do an issue where where Barbie goes birding. So they asked me, for all this information, and I'm telling them, all right, well, you should do this, you should have it like this is how I can do it. And so the issue comes out, and Barbie meets a birder, and it's an old white man. And I'm like,
Even when you're in their face, it's like, I don't see you. But I mean, I talked to more people who said, now come on, you think that brother was bird watching? I said, he said he was birding. And I believe him, because why else would you be in the park at that hour?
Oh, no, you don't want to know the answer to that question. Not in the ramble.
Right. I forgot where I was talking about. Yeah, no. Yeah. I got you. Tell us about working with Marvel. How was that?
That was pure joy. It was really, really fun. And I hope that in the chapter in the book about marvel I was able to communicate some of that joy. I mean, basically, and I said this before in some other interview, we were all a bunch of weirdos who somehow loved each other, you know? Yeah. And there was space for us to be weird. You know, I showed up, I was the second openly gay person, you know, working there. The other openly gay person helped me get my job.
Right.
And you know, there wasn't a lot of that in comics back then. You know, comics was sort of the preserve of, you know, developmentally arrested, you know, permanently adolescent juvenile males.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then here's this queer person. And, you know, people at first were kind of like, but, you know, it was just another weird thing like the rest of everybody else's weird things.
Yeah.
And we all rolled with each other. And it was great. It was really a lot of fun. I hope, if nothing else, if somebody reads that chapter and was like, wow, that must have been fun. Yeah, it was.
So tell us about your work with the NYC Audubon.
Well, we kind of already did that.
I know.
But no, we.
Oh no! How is the name change discussion going?
Oh,
that's what I'm supposed to.
All right. You're going right for the raw nerve.
Going to the throat.
All right for the raw nerve. All right. So, the first thing is personally, I am in favor of the name change, and I am happy to say that the chapter decided as a whole that we are going to change the name. So that to me is a good thing.
To something you can tell?
We haven't decided yet.
Oh, okay.
It's gonna be this whole process to figure out what the new name is going to be.
Oh, okay.
But it's funny because I truly was right on the line with this because I've been birding since I was, 9 or 10.
Right.
And basically my whole life, Audubon has meant nothing more or less than birds and the preservation of birds.
Right.
So that's what Audubon means to me. That half of me. The other half of me is a black man who, as this information came out, certainly I became aware of it, over the last 5 years or so, and I'm like, that expletive deleter sold slaves to fund his work and was in favor of slavery and desecrated, indigenous graves. Yeah. That expletive deleted has to go. Yeah. So, I had both reactions.
Do you all know what we're talking about?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
For the folks who don't, please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So John James Audubon, for which the Audubon Society is named, was an incredible artist who basically popularized the birds of North America. He did these. He drew these life-size portraits of all the birds of North America, and they became a sensation. So fast forward like 50 years or so after Audubon is dead, a bunch of ladies who lunch who were trying to save the great egret from becoming extinct because milliners were hunting it for the gorgeous plumes for hats. They decided to form a society to protect the birds, and they decided to name it after John James Audubon. So go through all those years, Audubon, certainly in North America, kind of becomes synonymous with birding and birds and saving birds. But in the last couple of years, and this is not new knowledge, but it's just the awareness was not out there. But the awareness got out that Audubon was a slave owner, sold slaves to finance himself and his work, was staunchly pro-slavery, and desecrated indigenous graves so he could collect their skulls and send them to a researcher friend of his. Really ugly stuff. So then the question becomes, all right, well, so do you keep the name? And this is why it's an issue. Because, a lot of people are like, no, Audubon just means birds. That's what it's come to mean. And then, other people are like, no, that's awful. You can't do that. So, what sort of swung it for me was the fact that information is not only out there, but it's spreading. And birding has a deficit of black people to begin with. It is overwhelmingly white historically, and even still now, much as it is beginning to change. We have to change it. We have to get everybody of all colors involved in birding. Otherwise, we are going to lose more than the 1/3 of North American birds that we've already lost just in my lifetime of birding. If we are going to stop that decline and reverse that decline, as the demographics of the country change, we've got to engage all those demographics in birding. Otherwise, we're going to reach a point where there will be no constituency for the protection of the birds. And birding and birds will be relegated to, oh, that's just something white people do. As, more and more black legislators and more black voters and brown voters and voters of all colors just don't care because we haven't done the work of engaging them. We can't do that work if we're leading with, hey, join our organization named after this guy who treated you like property. It's not going to fly. And that's why we've got to change the name, not because we're trying to erase the past. We can't. John James Audubon is in history, maybe with an asterisk now that says, this is part of his legacy too, but he is part of the history of popularizing birds and birding in North America. You cannot erase that. But we're looking forward to the fact that we have to bring these birds back, and to do that, as I always like to say, if we're going to have a diversity of birds, we've got to have a diversity of people who care about the birds, and that's why the name's got to go. That's why it's got to change. So that's where we came from.
So I want to know, what are your tips for anybody who's feeling intimidated about birding? What should they do? How should they begin?
Well, what did you do?
I had a conversation. Yes, that's right. That's right. My great-granddaughter and I saw something. I live in Jersey, and I have quite a few birds flying all over the place. And I heard one, and because I've been reading the book, I heard one. So I decided to answer, because I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what it was, but I answered it with a whistle. The whistle he was giving me, like, and my great-granddaughter said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to talk to the bird." She was like, "What?" She doesn't know I smoke, but it's a whole other thing.
She does now.
And I said, well, let's try it together. And so we tried it together. And so I don't know that we contacted, but somebody else answered. Another bird responded to our birding. And it was quite fun. And so I think we'll probably try to do it a couple of more times.
And that's all it is. That's just engaging,
Right.
Looking and observing and listening and observing. That's all it takes to start birding. So you don't need to be intimidated. You don't have to have a wealth of knowledge. I know a lot of our Central Park clan is here. We tend to be a very welcoming community. And if someone shows up and they don't know, we will tell them. We're like, oh, well, if you want to tell a Louisiana water thrush from a northern water thrush, you got to look at this and this and that. And we'll spill our guts.
Right.
Probably want to stop us. And we are happy to share our knowledge. And you'll learn, and that's part of the fun is the learning. But you don't have to go into the field, prepped with knowledge. Just go out there and observe and see what you find, and that'll raise questions. And then maybe you'll run into another birder and you can ask them. And we love to spill about it.
So here's a weird question. Are there any birds you shouldn't call?
Oh, okay. Well, now you're opening up another can of worms.
Uh-oh.
I'm not going to go into that in detail, but you just want to be conscious of the fact that, when you can actually bring a bird in if you imitate it well enough.
Right.
And you want to do that in moderation. You don't want to think of it this way. Whoopi, 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 would that make you insane after a while?
I don't know. I do. It happens every day. It happens every day.
But that's kind of what you're doing to the bird if you're calling it in. So we all do it every once in a while.
Right.
We'll make some spishing sound that helps bring the bird out.
Some what kind of sound?
Sometimes the bird will come up curious and be like, ooh.
See, that's a cat sound to me. Oh. That's how I call it. is how I get my cat.
Oh, well, you may get a bird now.
Uh-oh.
A catbird, maybe.
A cat. Is there such a thing?
There is. Oh, and catbirds breed in Central Park. They breed in other parts of this town.
Okay. All of you birding people, can you give me the sound of a catbird?
Oh, they can do that.
Okay, wait. Let us, who don't bird, close our eyes. Okay? We're closing our eyes. What does it sound like? Apparently not. No, that's what they sound like?
It is called a catbird because one of its main call sounds like a meowing cat. That's why it's called a catbird.
See, there's all kind of stuff going on above your head. You know,
this town.
In this
not
town.
Just pigeons.
This is true. This is true. Now, I suspect people may have questions for you. And I would like to open the floor up and just know that it might take a second to see you. You'll just have to deal with it. Okay, there's a man right there. Please stand up, sir.
All right. Well, I'm not an expert on the value of the lawns. I would guess that obviously it depends on the species. I would say they are neutral. They serve some value, especially to migrants of some species who would come in and be able to find plenty of bugs and worms and things to eat in those lawns. They are not prime habitat by any means. You won't find any birds making use of them, I don't think, for breeding purposes. But go out to Staten Island, and they have taken Fresh Kills landfill, which used to be the biggest garbage dump in the world, and they have changed it now into brand new grassland. And this makes my heart sing so much because grassland birds are among the birds that have taken the most steep, precipitous decline in North America. And we have lost so many grasslands. I grew up near the town of Hempstead, and I remember as a kid, it's one of my earliest memories is going out to what was called the Hempstead Plain. It was the last of the grasslands out there, and it was the spectacular expanse. And I was too young. I hadn't started birding yet, so I don't know what kind of birds were out there. I'm sure it was amazing. And then they paved it over to make the Nassau Coliseum. So we lose grasslands. We just gained acres and acres and acres bigger than Central Park of grassland out in Staten Island. And, to borrow a phrase, if you build it, they will come. There are sedge wrens nesting there. There are grasshopper sparrows nesting there. There are savanna sparrows nesting there. It is a grasshopper paradise in terms of bugs. So this is a wonderful thing, to have a true grassland in the confines of New York City. It is not open to the public yet, I'm pretty sure. But once it does, go out there and experience it before they decide to turn it into baseball fields or something. And hopefully, because the sedge wren is endangered and because they are present, hopefully that means at least some of it will be preserved as grassland, because to get new grassland is so rare, and we've got it here in New York City.
Nice. Here's a lady in the back. I'll get you next. Yes, ma'am.
Several, many, but we call that, if you've been looking for it for a long time and you've chased it and you haven't seen it, we call that your nemesis bird. And my nemesis bird right now is the gyrfalcon. Gyrfalcon is the largest falcon in the world, specializes in hunting other birds. It can take seagulls and ducks. It's that big. Oh, yeah. Yeah, gyrfalcon is big. And they're birds of the far north. They're like, circumpolar. But every once in a while, one comes down to like the beaches of Long Island, where I chased it and didn't see it. Or to Westchester, where I chased it and didn't see it. And they breed in Iceland, where I've been twice and didn't see it. So the gyrfalcon right now is my nemesis bird. I love to see that one.
And you say it's called the jerk falcon?
Gyrfalcon, Gyrfalcon, all one word. Gyrfalcon.
Does it have a sound?
You know what? It does. I don't know the gyrfalcon sound because I've never seen it.
Ah, okay. Something to look forward to. There you are. I see you. I'm coming to you next.
Really interesting question, and there are a couple of answers. First of all, birds definitely have different dialects. I remember I was down in birding in Maryland, this is like years ago, and I heard this bird singing, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And I looked at it, and it was a cardinal. I know the cardinal song Cold, but this cardinal was a southern cardinal. It had literally had a southern dialect. One of the interesting things is, for example, on my phone I have an app called the Sibley Guide to Birds, and it includes all the songs. And when they give you the songs, they will usually give you several versions of the songs from different places because the dialects are different. Language is a complicated idea. You know, that involves syntax and grammar and all of that. So language is tougher. Probably the ones who might have something approaching language are corvids, crows and their family, and in particular ravens, who are probably chimpanzee smart. So they have an incredible variety of vocalizations. So who knows quite with that. But for example, black-capped chickadees, they get their name from their call, chickadee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee. What scientists have discovered is that they will use that call as an alarm call, but it varies depending on the threat level. So if, let's say this young lady right there is a black-capped chick, or is a human being, and I'm a black-capped chickadee, and I'm like, chickadee-dee, chickadee-dee, because she's not much of a threat. She's so big, she doesn't care about me, she doesn't notice me. Now make her a saw-whet owl, which will eat a black-capped chickadee, and that same chickadee is going, chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. The number of D's at the end indicates the threat level. At least that's what the latest research says. So is that language? I mean, they're certainly communicating something. And finally, you said, do they speak each other's language? One thing that they do is alarm calls that birds use tend to be very similar. They're very sudden and sharp. And across species, they understand it. So if, one bird sends out the alarm call, the other birds will respond, and they will know danger in the neighborhood. So, wow.
Yes, standing.
Well, the biggest problem with bird feeding in Central Park is that we have a rat problem in this town. And it's the same thing with people who feed pigeons. They think they're feeding the pigeons, and they are, but the pigeons don't get everything. And what the pigeons don't get goes to the rats. So that's the biggest issue with feeding birds in Central Park. There's another issue with people, and this is especially a problem in the North Woods. The North Woodsers will know about this. People feed the birds by hand. They've habituated some of the birds up there to expect a handout from humans. That's cool if you want to get a close-up view of a bird, but it's not necessarily the best thing for the bird. So, feeding. Feeders in general, I don't think there's an issue with them too much. Like if you're putting a bird feeder up in your backyard, as long as you keep it clean, if you have a yard, we are in New York City, but if you keep it clean and you keep it stocked through the winter so that the birds don't, sort of pause there during their migration, thinking they have food for the whole winter, and then you stop and they're stuck. So, if you do it responsibly, I think it's fine. I spend a lot of time in the Southern California desert, and when I'm out there, I put up a hummingbird feeder that I, keep clean, but fill with, specific proportion of sugar water, and watch the hummingbirds come right to it, and it's glorious. So the statement is, hummingbirds have been absent, or perhaps absent, from Long Island or other regions. No, they're actually there. They've always been there. It depends on where you are. But we get one species of hummingbird in the east. and it's the ruby-throated hummingbird, and it likes forests. It likes to breed in forests. So if you got a forest, then you might have the possibility of hummingbirds. But the thing to do is to put up a feeder or grow native plants that have bright red or orange tubular flowers. They love that. Something like coral honeysuckle. Yeah. I grow that on my roof here in Manhattan, and it's like putting up a rest stop billboard on the hummingbird migration, because they don't breed in Manhattan, but they pass through. And I have gotten hummingbirds every year up on my Manhattan rooftop. They come in and they're feeding off the coral honeysuckle.
Howard Johnson's.
It's the Howard
Johnson's.
Howard Johnson.
So, okay, so I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5. Okay, and now I'm.
And there's a kid question over there.
Oh, I didn't see. Well, hello. Come on over.
Hi.
My name is Heather, and I have 2 questions. So, my first question is, what should I do first?
What should you do first for STEM Week?
No, like, what should I do? What should I do first when I start birding?
Oh, okay. Well, you've got the binoculars, which is fabulous. So, do you know how to use binoculars properly?
You just look in them, and then it gets like a closer look.
Yes, but the trick to using them so that you really get a good look is whatever you want to see, and let's say you see that sign that says art back there? You find that with your naked eye. Keep your eye on that sign. Don't move your eyes, and bring the binoculars to your eyes. That's it. That's it. Did that work? So you want to practice that, because if you can master that trick, it's going to make your birding so much more successful. And what was your second question?
My second question is how many times, like a week, should I refill my bird feeder?
Oh, you just want to refill it, whenever it becomes empty. You just don't want to let the seed sit for too long, because then it can get mildewy or mold or, bad stuff in there that the birds will harm the birds. So, when it gets empty, put in some fresh seed.
I put on the cone ones, and then the next day mine was gone and my mom's was still there, and then 2 weeks later, gone. They were both gone.
They're hungry. They're like us. Well, very nice to meet you. What's your name? Hi. Oh, right, of course. You said that, and it's on the front, right on the book. Nice to meet you, Heather. Thank you. Lovely. Lovely.
So will the 5 people that I pointed to just stand up real quick? Okay. This is called the speed round. What's your question?
Yes, red-bellied woodpeckers never used to be in this area. When I was a kid, I didn't see them until I took a camping trip down in the Carolinas. They breed in Central Park. They breed all the way up to Maine now. That's my understanding anyway, that they've started breeding in Maine. Migration, for example, the spring migration has shifted about 2 weeks earlier than it used to be. The problem is that the birds can't adapt quickly enough to these changes. So that's why we've got to do something about climate change.
Uh-huh.
It's a possibility. Whoopi's gone, So, I may not have a choice,
yeah,
but it's a good idea.
Yeah. Ma'am.
Do you have any advice about feral or outdoor cats as it relates to the
Oh, it wasn't enough that they got me on the dogs. Now you want to get me on the cats. I live with a cat now. My partner right behind you is smiling ear to ear because it was his cat and now it's our cat, and she and I have established a little bit of détente finally. But she's an indoor cat, And that's the thing. You want to keep cats indoors, please.
Yes, but you also know that if you see feral cats, call the ASPCA and help get them to somewhere safe. Because feral cats carry all kinds of stuff on their nails. I'm a cat person. Yes.
And mind you, for example, in Central Park now, there are coyotes.
Yeah.
So the coyotes will eat the cats.
Yeah.
So you want to get the cats out of there for their own good.
Yeah. Sir. Oh, yes. Yes.
It came out right away.
Yeah. And it's a great thing to know that he can teach me birding and I can tell him all the dish on all the shows. Madam. No, you got to stand up and ask the question.
I just want to say, as I have said to you already, thank you so much for the really important and beautiful work that you're doing. I think you are inspiring so many people of all different walks of life. And as a person of color who has also loved birds from a very young age, it is just so exciting and beautiful to see. So thank you for that first. And I wanted to also ask you, for those of us who don't have the platform that you find yourself with now, what is the best way for us to encourage everyone from youth to, with, for example, as an LGBTQ ally, I'd like to know, how can we make the birding world safer for the community as well, with this terrible rise in hate crimes that we've been seeing, our fellow brown people and black people? How can we make it more welcoming, more safe, and is there anything we can do with our much smaller voices?
If I had a magic answer to that, I would be, solving the world's problems. But, we can all do, before, the incident opened up whatever doors that I'm now walking through and doing things with. I was doing what I could for years and years and years, just, volunteering in the schools. If you have the time, what I would do is, I had an understanding employer who wanted to keep me, so I said, look, one day a week, I've got to disappear for about 3 hours in the middle of the afternoon, and I'll make up the hours and I'll come back and use those to, go into the schools. Because for the very reason you mentioned, I knew that these kids probably didn't see a black man who was into science and into nature and into birds, so this would be a revelation to them. And it was something I could do to give back the way Elliot gave to me, I could give to somebody else. So, you can do things like that on your own individual level. When you're in the field, just make sure that, other black and brown birders know that they are welcome and that you have their back. Make sure that LGBTQ birders know that they are welcome. If there's a trans birder, make sure that they know that they are welcome and you have their back. And that's all of our jobs. And if we do that, slowly, bit by bit, we might be able to make some headway.
So, Kristen Cooper, stand up, take a bow, baby.